From Bride to Scapegoat, Why My Dad Refused to Walk Me Down the Aisle. Everyone's heard that romantic notion where the father of the bride walks her down the aisle on her special day. My story, however, is a far cry from that picturesque image. In fact, my father actually refused to give me away when I got married. No, I'm not joking. My father refused to play this key role in my wedding because he claimed I was the reason his marriage failed. And get this, decades before my wedding even happened. It's worth noting that my parents divorced over 20 years before I tied the knot. Talk about holding a grudge, right? It's been years since I've spoken to my father. And while I have mixed emotions about the situation, I've always wondered what his angle was. Was he genuinely still hurt from our family's past, or was he just trying to manipulate me and make himself feel better? As I look back on that difficult day, I realize my father's actions still affect me today. His refusal to give me away on my wedding day left me feeling hurt and confused, but also curious about the motivations behind his decision. I've tried to put the past behind me, but I sometimes find myself thinking about what I would say to my father if I had the chance. Would I forgive him and let go, or would I confront him about his hurtful behavior? Only time will tell, but for now, I'm focusing on moving forward and creating a happy life for myself. It's not always easy to see things clearly when we're caught up in our own emotions, but I've come to understand that my father's actions were a reflection of his own pain and issues, not mine. And that's a liberating realization. Now, every time I think about my wedding day and my father's refusal to give me away, I choose to focus on the love that surrounds me and the people who truly care about me. My partner, my friends, and my family have all been there for me, and I'm grateful for that. So while my story may not be like the fairy tales we hear about, happy families and perfect relationships, it's mine, and it's taught me the value of forgiveness, self-love, and the importance of surrounding myself with people who uplift and support me. My family's picture-perfect facade began to crack the moment I was conceived. My mom, with a career that was taking off, and my sister Emily, who was always at the forefront, couldn't have been more perfect. Emily was the classic golden child, receiving all the attention and praise that came with it. And then, without warning, I came along to shake things up. The fact that my mother wasn't expecting another baby doesn't necessarily imply it was unplanned. My dad, on the other hand, couldn't possibly comprehend the scenario that led to my birth. And yet, that's exactly what happened. My father's conviction that we were too busy to have another child was nothing short of infantile. He wanted to blame the unexpected arrival on my mother, essentially shifting the responsibility of his skepticism onto her shoulders. My childhood was a tumultuous one, feeling disconnected and resented by my father, who somehow held on to the notion that I was an outsider, only made matters worse. My mother, trying to navigate the turmoil, started to lose her footing. Her world, which was once solidly grounded in career success, began to crumble as she struggled to connect with me. Meanwhile, Emily began to withdraw, noticing the significant emotional shift in her parents. The once rewarding dynamic between her and our mother became strained. It was clear that our arrival, and mine in particular, was altering the course of our lives. The bond between my sister and me was growing weaker by the day. Emily's behavior, however, mirrored a new narrative that unfolded, one of resentment towards our family's newcomer. She would occasionally turn her frustration towards me, and our family's inner turmoil only intensified. I grew up with the notion that our situation wasn't typical, but it seemed that I had unwittingly redefined my family's purpose. As time went on and I looked to find my place in the world, the complicated legacy left to me gradually became clear. My father went full Sherlock Holmes mode, but instead of solving crimes, he was busy creating conspiracy theories about my mom having an affair. Spoiler alert, she didn't. We even did a DNA test later that proved I was 100% his daughter. But did that change anything? Nope. Growing up, my father was like a professional ice sculptor, cold and distant. He'd be there physically at family dinners, but emotionally, he might as well have been on Mars. I remember trying to have simple conversations with him, but it felt like I was attempting to communicate with a brick wall. Any attempt at openness or honesty would be met with silence, or worse, a cold rebuke. As I got older, I began to understand that this emotional detachment was a coping mechanism for him, a way to deal with the stress and anxiety of the world around him. But it was a heavy burden to carry, and one that weighed on our family dynamics for years to come. My wedding day was supposed to be a time of great joy and celebration, but instead it turned into a day of drama and heartache. My father refused to give me away, claiming that I was the reason his marriage failed decades ago. It was a ridiculous assertion, one that I'd heard before on countless occasions, but it still managed to cut deep. In that moment, I felt like I was reliving my entire childhood, with all its pain and uncertainty. But I knew I couldn't let him get the best of me, so I stood tall, looked him straight in the eye, and told him that I was happy, that I had found my true love, and that he was the one who was still hurting. It was a moment of raw emotion, one that I'll never forget. You know those kids who become overachievers trying to win their parents' love? Hello, I was like a one-person academic Olympics. Straight as? Check. Student council president? You bet. Valedictorian? Obviously. Ever since I was a young girl, my parents had high expectations for me. They pushed me to excel in every aspect of my life, always emphasizing the importance of doing better, of striving for perfection. And so I did exactly that. I studied hard, I participated in extracurricular activities, and I excelled in every area of my life. But beneath the facade of success, I was struggling with the weight of their expectations. I felt like I was living in a constant state of comparison, constantly trying to measure up to an unattainable ideal. My parents never told me that they loved me for who I was, but rather that I had to be the best version of myself in order to get their approval. I basically turned into Elle Woods from Legally Blonde, minus the pink outfits, and plus a lot more daddy issues. But unlike the movie, there was no heartwarming transformation scene where my father finally saw my worth. Instead, I was left feeling like a trophy that had been won and lost, an achievement to be celebrated but ultimately discarded when it no longer served its purpose. My mom, still trying to play peacemaker after all these years, suggested I ask my father to walk me down the aisle. I won't lie, the thought of it had crossed my mind before. Plus, it would have been a meaningful way to include him in my special day. The awkward conversation. Me? Hey Dad, would you walk me down the aisle on my wedding day? No. Emily is my only real daughter. I felt a sting from his response. It was a harsh truth, but I tried not to take it personally. I knew there was more to the story. It turned out that my parents' marriage had problems long before I came along. There was a rift between them that grew and deepened over the years, eventually leading to their divorce. He blamed me for causing that divorce, for disrupting their relationship. I couldn't imagine going through all that on my special day without having some support. That's where my Uncle Mark stepped in, being the kind of man he is. He offered to walk me down the aisle, and I gratefully accepted. As I walked towards my groom, I couldn't help but think about how different things could have been if my father had taken that rejection a little differently. Perhaps he'd have taken the opportunity to apologize or at least offer a genuine smile in support. However, it wasn't meant to be. In the end, it was a blessing in disguise to have Uncle Mark walk me down that aisle. Not just because of how he helped me through that difficult time, but because it showed me my own strength and resilience in the face of adversity. As I exchanged vows with my husband, I felt grateful for the presence of those I loved, the ones who did stand by me in a meaningful way. I knew then, and I still do now, that true family isn't determined by biology. It's the love and the bonds you create with those around you. The memory of my wedding day is still etched in my mind. As a day, I was reminded that family is more than just blood ties. It's the choices you make and the people you choose to surround yourself with. The drama at the wedding planning meeting turned into something straight out of a Jerry Springer episode, minus the chair throwing, thankfully. My father decided this was the perfect moment to air out decades of his conspiracy theories. I'm not sure what was more shocking, the fact that he finally decided to share these outlandish claims, or the timing of this bombshell revelation. Growing up, I had learned to just humor him when he would bring up his favorite conspiracy theories. However, I had no idea he still believed in them so strongly or that he would decide to share them with my bride-to-be. It was clear he thought this revelation would somehow exculpate him for his latest decision. My father had been acting strangely for weeks, constantly distracting me with questions and requests, but I had no idea he was plotting something big. As it turns out, Jerry Springer had nothing on my father's reasons for suddenly refusing to give me away on my wedding day. His justification was astonishingly convoluted, involving a lengthy list of his grievances against the world. It was like he was trying to get his own talking head segment on some obscure TV show. His claims were such a departure from reality that even our maid of honor, Rachel, and my best man, Mike, were speechless. My fiancée, Emily, looked absolutely horrified. We were all trying to wrap our heads around this sudden departure from reality, but it seemed that my father's grip on sanity had finally snapped. As it turned out, decades of suppressed anger and unmet expectations drove my father to this decision. The ridiculous theories he was peddling were just a convenient smokescreen to deflect blame. Little did he know that his clever disguise would only lead to more complications, forcing our wedding party to navigate an additional nightmare scenario. Enter my husband, my personal knight in shining armor, who apparently didn't get the memo about staying quiet during family drama. He stood up and delivered a speech that would have made Morgan Freeman proud, telling my father exactly where he could stick his theories. With a sense of conviction, he expressed disbelief and outrage. "How is it that you could deny your daughter a day that was supposed to be full of love and joy?" he asked passionately, imitating husband's serious tone. "Sir, with all due respect, which is none at this point, how is it that you could deny your daughter a day that was supposed to be full of love and joy?" he scolded. My father replied that I was solely responsible for their divorce, I continued recalling. He claimed I was the reason his marriage failed decades ago. I remembered with a lot of pain still present in my heart. "I don't know where to start," my husband was saying while addressing my dad. "Maybe start by taking some responsibility for the mistakes you've made," my husband concluded firmly. His words cut through all the tension as my dad looked on humbled, before changing the subject. The drama wouldn't end quite yet. The family intervention that followed was like a really bad episode of Dr. Phil. Everyone had something to say. Even Emily, my sister, the former golden child, stood up to our father. It's not surprising she took this approach, considering how she was always pushed to excel in every aspect of her life. Her involvement in our childhood and her relationship with Dad made her perfect, in his eyes, while the rest of us struggled to meet his impossible expectations. As she began to speak, her words were laced with a mix of emotions: anger, sadness, and a hint of bitterness. She accused Dad of not only being inconsistent, but also manipulative, using guilt and shame as a means to control those around him. The room fell silent as her words hit their mark, and I could feel the weight of confrontation settling in. Even our usually stoic mother seemed taken aback by the tension in the air. I watched as Dad's face turned red with rage, his face a twisted mixture of anger and defensiveness. But what I found most striking was how he refused to take responsibility for his actions, instead pointing fingers at those of us standing before him. Talk about a dodge. It's clear that he's still stuck in his own blame game, unwilling to let go of the resentment he's carried for so long. My sister's words, though laced with emotion, seemed to strike a chord in me. It was as if the scales had finally fallen, and I could see the truth in front of me. I realized that her harsh words weren't an attack on me, but rather a reflection of our collective struggles under Dad's reign. You know what's funny? Sometimes the happiest endings come from letting go. Since cutting ties with my father, I feel lighter than a cloud after dropping all its rain. My life now is filled with people who actually want to be in it. My amazing husband, my supportive mom, my rebel sister Emily, and friends who've become family. We laugh together, cry together, and support each other in ways that truly matter. I think back to my wedding day and how it was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. Instead, it turned into a nightmare when my father refused to give me away. He claimed that I was the reason his marriage failed decades ago. It was a blaming game that left me feeling like I was the problem, not the solution. But the truth is, I was just a young woman trying to find my place in the world, and make my family proud. Looking back, I realized that his actions were a direct result of his own failures. He was too afraid to take responsibility for his mistakes and instead chose to shift the blame onto me. But I'm not going to give him that power anymore. I've taken back control of my life, and I'm living the life I deserve. And to anyone out there dealing with toxic family members, remember, DNA might make you related, but love and respect make you family. Sometimes the best family tradition to start is breaking toxic cycles. It's not easy, but it's worth it in the end. You deserve to be surrounded by people who love and support you, not those who tear you down. I've learned so much on this journey of self-discovery and healing. I've learned to set boundaries, to prioritize my own needs, and to surround myself with people who uplift me. And I'm not alone in this journey. There are so many of us out there who have struggled with similar experiences and come out the other side stronger and wiser. If you're struggling with a toxic family member or relationship, know that you're not alone. Reach out to people who care about you, seek out support groups or therapy, and take care of yourself in the process. Your mental health is worth it. Your happiness is worth it. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a wonderful life to live and absolutely zero conspiracy theories to deal with. It's time for me to focus on the positive and everything that's coming next. Stay tuned, friends.